I had only 1 year with the good memory with my family. I was about 9, 10. My family ran around the temple, and there's a lot of music and food were everywhere, you know. War already started in Cambodia. I did not know who's against who. My good time was over, and I didn't know that in the beginning, but when the Khmer Rouge start coming in, their faces were grim. They seemed to be very angry at something. 2 or 3 Khmer Rouge scream at everybody, you know, and they announced that the American would drop bomb where we live, you know, would drop bomb in the whole city. They said, tomorrow morning everybody has to go. Right in the morning, early morning, I've never seen a highway like packed with thousands of people. On the highway, we kept walking with the Khmer Rouge with the guns following us. So it was hectic, and I was taken away by the Khmer Rouge now from my mom, my aunt. I never seen them again after that.
I was 7 years old. I remember a trusted friend of my family's that we call Uncle sexually molesting me. It happened several times, and I never said anything. I know that his wife, who we called Aunt, was always there, but I knew that once she started to drink, she would go to sleep. And I knew once she went to sleep that he was going to get me.
Well, I happened to be there during the build-up to the peak climactic moment of the Vietnam War. I was there 67, 68. I was with a unit, the 1st Air Cavalry Division, that was sent into the thick of the fighting. We had to go relieve the siege of Khe Sanh. The 1st Air Cavalry Division was called upon as a lead unit. I had a grenade that fell off as I jumped off the chopper. And I reached down to get the grenade in my right hand, and it exploded before I got there. I lay there literally in a pool of blood, dying, with my right arm gone, my right leg gone, my left leg shattered, and realized that I really pretty much fighting through the pain of the moment and through the shock that was setting in, had a choice between life and death, that I looked over the precipice. And I felt myself slipping into unconsciousness, and really didn't want to go to sleep, and didn't want to cross the precipice. And so I fought for consciousness, and thank God was able to stay conscious, because I felt if I ever went unconscious, I'd never make it back.
We're in the neighborhood of South Boston. We grew up in a family of 10 kids, and my mother raised us on her own on AFTC, on welfare. When we first moved into the housing development that we grew up in, there was a lot of tension in the neighborhood because we were newcomers, and there was a lot of violence around that. My mother was hit with a stray bullet while standing in the kitchen. I was standing right next to her. She was in the hospital for quite a while that evening, and I just remember I had my 2 little brothers. Again, I was minding them, and what we did was we in order to go to sleep, we got a big mattress and put it in a place in the house where there were no windows.
So I was taken to the concentration camp, where I spent 2 years out of 4 years of Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge made a special axe, small axe to kill the people, and they hit them right in the cerebellum. They hit that you can hear miles away, and I still hear it. All the victims, they took out their liver and spleen out. They know how to do it very well, and when it comes out, his arm, you know, stained with blood, and his body and his whole clothes, you know, and he came to my center, and he would fry the liver and spleen to show us. And sometimes they want us to eat, and I was tempted to eat it because I was hungry all the time, and they just lured us to do it, and then they took it away. And sometimes they would ask the children to come around and make a circle, and the Khmer Rouge would punish them. And if somebody like want to cry or show any emotion, they would take them to kill too.
I lay there shattered and dying with a team of some medics at the beginning, and a good helicopter airlift shot of morphine, and a team of 5 physicians. 43 pints of blood later, and 5 hours, they saved my life. And that, looking back, was the easy part.
The memories are stored so far back, and they're just beginning to come forward with details. I've started to see my mother being beaten by my stepfather. And that was really, really hard for me because I felt helpless. And I always felt afraid. I never knew when this person was going to be crazy. I never knew what he was going to do. I remember one time he was looking for her, and she had ran to protect herself. And we were in the house. And what we did was we wanted to make him believe that nobody was home, so we went down the basement and we pulled the switch that shuts off the lights. And he jumped right through the window, through the glass, through the Venetian blind, through the curtain, and just came in the house looking for her. And I remember us hiding, like in a hiding place, and I remember being so afraid that he was going to get me that I almost wet myself. I remember that. And that went on for a long, long time.
My brother Davey was mentally ill. He had had a breakdown at the age of 14. He was the oldest. And from what I heard, their father would come home and take everything out on him and my mother. On an afternoon in August 1980, Davey jumped off the roof in front of our house, and I witnessed that. When the paramedics came, he was covered in blood, and they, and still struggling and fighting, and they carried him off like that. He was strapped in, but just really trying to break free and fight. I don't know why or whom, but and that's the last time I saw him. I mean, he was still young when he died. He was 23, but he was an adult. But when you really think about what it goes back to, and you see that it, it's stuff that people did to kids. It's
hard. I had a child when I was 15 years old, and a fire happened at that particular time. Like I told you, I can't remember the dates and the year and the time, but I remember I had my baby and she was on the couch, and I woke up to the sound of fire, 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 and running out. They couldn't find my little sister. They couldn't find my niece. What we did when we were afraid, we hid. And they hid in the closet, and they couldn't find them. And I remember standing outside the building with no shoes on, holding my baby, looking up, and the fire seemed to be like a tongue licking, coming out the windows, and knowing they were inside there, and not knowing what to do and feeling helpless. And knowing even before the fire department got there or the ambulance that they were dead.
My brother Frank was New England Golden Gloves champion, and he was going to go professional in August of 1984. In July of 1984, he got involved with, the wrong crowd, more older, experienced gangsters who kind of used him for his health and abilities and strength to do an armored car hold up, a bank job. He made it all the way back with the money into the getaway car, and he had suffered a minor wound from the gunshot, but he was, I guess they just, didn't have much use for him at that point. They'd already gotten the money, so they strangled him to death and put him in trash bags and stuffed him under the seat and went to getaway car number 2. After Frank died, my brother Kevin kind of lost it. By the fall of that same year, he got involved in a jewelry store heist. SWAT teams and everything came and got him. They took him away. Within days, it got out into the street that he was cooperating, and everyone knew it. And he was found dead in prison. So less than a year from my brother Frank's funeral, we buried a second brother. You're at one wake, and you're not sure if you're just having a flashback or if it's real, and who's exactly in the casket, because it's happened multiple times.
I started to drink, and I started to use drugs, and I started to numb out, and And I was trying to make sure that that feeling that was inside of me, I was trying to make it go away, and it just wouldn't go away. I don't think there was enough drugs and alcohol on the planet to fill that hole in my stomach that I had. To feel that sadness and unhappiness and fear that I constantly felt. It seemed like I was unhappy or sad or fearful for years and years and years. And during that time, so many things happened to me. The violence in my life, getting into relationships that seemed to match the relationships that my mother was in, and being beaten down and kicked and punched and slapped and hit with objects and thrown downstairs and forced into prostitution and feeding my addiction and the partner that I had at that particular time's addiction. I was homeless, and I was living from place to place, and I was sleeping on people's couches, and I was dragging these big green garbage bags with everything I owned in them from place to place, and we used to call that matching luggage, the glad luggage, and I was thinking about it, and I remember that I don't know what happened to those bags after a while. It was like being in this bowl that had slippery sides, you know what I mean, and never being able to grab the top, just sliding back down all the time.
My little brother was 13 at the time. His friend got a hold of a gun that was carelessly left around by an adult, was hiding out with that gun. My brother heard the gunshot, found his friend, found the gun, found his friend dying, bleeding to death, gunshot wound to his head. My little brother, became the target of their investigation. He was 13 years old. He was falsely accused of murdering his best friend. He was charged with murder in the first degree. My little brother was convicted of manslaughter. It was overturned based on discrepancies in the evidence, based on that the police had falsified some things and that wasn't brought into court. It was so clear to me that this and everything else that had happened in my life had a lot to do with being completely powerless, being in a poor, welfare, dependent, single-parent home in a housing project, and with no connections at all, and not knowing anybody.
I think most of the men went through the same thing I did. You face the stark reality of having lost parts of your body forever, and that you'll never be the person that you were, and yet you don't know the person you will be, and you're there in kind of an interim stage, and you don't know who the hell you are, or what's going to happen to you in life, and that's very depressing and very discouraging. And you have a great sense of loss, a great sense of pain, an overwhelming sense of depression. I can remember that we laid there in Walter Reed in the stake pit, the officer amputee ward, and there were only two programs that we really tuned into. And it was not the evening news, not the reports from the battlefield in Vietnam, not the reports of the casualties and the killed in action. It was Laugh-In on Monday nights 30 years ago. Anything for a laugh. And Saturday morning cartoons. Anything for Here, grown men, Army captains, majors, but we're all trying to learn how to laugh at what has happened. And so just in order to survive, you pick out little things throughout the day or little situations, anything to laugh at, because you think sometimes that you'll never, ever laugh again.
In 1979, we heard that the Vietnamese invaded on the radio, and the Khmer Rouge, right away, they put us into the truck and rushed us going to fight with the Vietnamese. Thousands of kids, like the Khmer Rouge would force them into the front line to shoot first, to draw the fire first, and to die first. And the Khmer Rouge themselves would stay behind. And like bullets, like range, I can see sometimes when bullets like flying, I can see, and it's just hard to survive. And I don't know how I've done it. And I fought it for about 4 or 5 months. Just see people killing all the time, smell blood all the time, and so I'd rather maybe decide at that time to die alone by myself. So I took off into the jungle. I walked for like 2 or 3 weeks. I ended up in the same place. I recognize, that's very hard, because you walk, so we don't know where you were going. And I don't know if many times I feel very lonely, and some, you want to kill yourself. I just keep walking, and sometimes I imagine that, at the end of this jungle, sometimes you can see the clear sky, that a clear place. I don't know what the place was, and that you would see your family again. I was trying to think about that very hard. I keep going fast, I had a bad malaria and unconscious, and a few orphans who saw me along the border and took me to the refugee camp. I was about 50 pounds then. I met my foster father there who found me, and later on he sponsored, about a year and a half, he sponsored me to come to America.
I was always in the street. I was always trying to maneuver, manipulate, or do something so I could use some person, place, or thing so I wouldn't have to feel bad. And so I was always in a position where things would happen to me, and a lot of those things were being picked up. Disorderly, trespass, acting out in the street, acting out on somebody else. But the last time that I got arrested was, it was the turning point in my life. It just made a big difference. It changed things for me. I was in that jail cell. I was in, they call it waiting trial, and I was detoxing from the drugs, and I was hurting so bad. I remember that the muscles in my legs were hurting so bad that my bones, every bone in my body, and it wasn't like, arthritic or like you bang it. It was kind of like inside my bones was hurting from those years and years and years of saturating myself with those substances. I had to deal with everything that I had tried not to deal with. I had to remember being molested. I had to remember being beaten by those relationships that I was in. I had to remember being raped. I had to remember being homeless. I had to remember the soup kitchens. I had to remember the neglect of my own children, and I had to remember that they were gone from my life and I didn't know where they were and that I didn't care. I had to remember that I would sell the food that I had just bought from shopping with the good intentions that I could never follow through on. And I had to deal with all of that stuff, and I had to come face to face with it. It was like this huge wave that knocked me down, this huge wave of feelings and fear and self-loathing and low self-esteem that I just had to deal with all at once because it just came rushing back. And it was hard. And I hated it, and I didn't want to feel it. And there was nothing I could do not to feel it. I was in jail. And I was sick, and I was hurting. And I was sad, and I was afraid. And I just had to deal. I met this woman, and she worked in the system, and she began to help me. And my thinking was that, I could probably use her to help me to get out of here, or to help me to do some things, but it really didn't turn out that way. It turned out that this was somebody that was a really, really great person and genuinely wanted to help people. It wasn't a job for her. It was like a calling, something that she did for people. And she looked into my eyes, and she knew that, I didn't want to be there. She helped me. This one woman showed me that there was at least one person on the planet that wanted to do something for somebody and didn't want anything back. And I always felt like it would be nice to be able to be like that. Like, how do you be like that? Where do you come from that you're like that? Like, who raised her,
When I first came to America, also I feel a lot of guilt in me, and I want to kill myself. I want to die because I don't know why I'm alive. Why? Because a lot of people died in my family, and millions of my people were killed. I had a fight with my brother, and I almost killed my adopted brother because he called me Khmer Rouge. My father came and said, "And you should go up and say sorry to your brother." And I never say sorry to anybody in my life, And he, all of a sudden we cry together, and I never cried before, and that time I cried uncontrollably, and he stood up and I stood up, we hugged each other, and my dad cried, and so that was a turning point for me, and I promised myself when I get up like that and I hug him, And I feel to myself, I said, people should not kill other people.
I learned after the Vietnam War and struggling with my own emotions that you never bury things dead. You bury them alive. And so you can't afford to bury the pain and hurt alive. You got to get it up and out. And that is painful. But the getting it out is also involved in action. And action that deals with other people, that is positive. The worst thing I could have done at the tender age of 26, retired Army captain, missing 2 legs and a right arm, was sit in a corner in my mother's living room and do nothing. That was the worst thing I could have done. So what did I do? I got up and ran for public office. Insanity. But it worked. I won. It worked for me. I had a mission, I had a cause, I had a purpose, I had a focus, I had a job. I had some meaning coming into my life.
And I remember when I was in jail, I remember saying, like, God, if I get out of here, you know, maybe one day I'll be able to do some things that will help other women not to go through what I'm going through. That, God, if you get me out of here, that's exactly what I'll do, I promise. I went into a treatment center right after that because it was suggested to me. I didn't know what the treatment center was going to do for me. I didn't know that. And I didn't go in there to stop using, really. I went in there so that I wouldn't ever have to go back to jail. In treatment, women taught me how to live, you know, because it was just so different. It was me finally. It wasn't the stuff that I had put in my body in order to be. It was me, and I was open, and I was ready, and I was clearing up, and my mind wasn't sloshed. It wasn't Swiss cheese, and I was able to take some things in and hear some things. And knowing this woman that didn't want anything from me, and then going into this place and seeing other people that were trying to do the same thing for me and didn't want anything, that helped me a lot. Because I had never had anybody in my life that did anything for me unconditionally, ever. And I'd started to meet people that did things for me unconditionally.
So I basically said that, I remember saying this too, I said that I'm not going to be powerless anymore. I'm going to have power, and I'm going to work on these issues, turn things around, work with other people in communities who are also powerless but haven't realized the potential they have to turn things around.
See, other people believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Other people loved me when I couldn't love myself. Other people cared about me when I couldn't care about myself. And before I even left the treatment facility, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to help women. I knew that a lot of the things that had happened to me all my life were because I didn't have any information. I didn't have a clue. I didn't know that there was anything different that I could be doing. I didn't know that there was a place for me to be.
And my dad started taking us places to meet other people and especially to talk to American people about our lives.
And we need to see adults who make wars in which children die, find a way to live in peace.
I never thought that people would care about what's going on in Cambodia or would care about my life. But after my speech, people cried and they came and hugged me, and I began to know that people are really caring if they know what's going on with me and my people, you know.
People often forgot the very physical presence of firearms as a deadly device that were in the hands of young people. And I personally was very concerned about that because, you know, regardless of all the other root causes that were present in the tragedies that happened to my family, guns did play a role. They played a big role. We started to bring together a diverse range of people from throughout the city, community residents, parents, youth, to the table to work on the issue of guns specifically. The group wanted to do a gun buyback program. and we started working on developing a program, what that would look like, how it would operate. The gun buyback has run annually for 4 years, and in total we've collected 2,900 working firearms. We've destroyed them all, we've melted them down, and I like to think that the gun buyback program helped spur on a lot of other programs throughout the city, neighborhood-based programs that resulted in this reduction.
I do know that I gained strength coming back and fighting for my cause, which was improvement of the lives of Vietnam veterans, particularly educational benefits under the GI Bill through the VA. Later on, President Carter appointed me as head of the VA, and I got to work hard to improve all the programs. So that was a very fulfilling thing for me, and helped me focus my life and energies on something positive, and helped me get my mind off myself.
I started to realize that there was things that I could do. I started to work in places where women were. And I remember the place that I work now, when I went there and I realized that they were working with women that had experienced every trauma that I had experienced. I knew that the power that I believe in, that's greater than me, had put me right there. Not just so that I could help people, but that I could continue to help myself. Things started to change in my life. I started to realize that anything was possible for me. That this person that had been through all that she had been through, that never believed that anything good could ever happen, that never laughed, could laugh. That I could smile, that I could actually feel good. I remember the first time I laughed from way down in my stomach and water came out my eyes. I had no idea that I thought that was an expression people used when they said, I laughed till I cried. I didn't think that really happened to people.
I've met Jimmy Carter. He also cried and hugged me when I gave my speech talking about my experience, and he asked me to if I can participate, I can be a speaker for Amnesty. So I agreed, and I became a speaker of Amnesty for 10 years. It's like a healing process for me, keep me going of not wanting to kill myself, If I do nothing, and I have no dad who really supported me, I would have gone crazy, I would have been dead now.
In the fourth gun buyback program last summer, I got a call from a local priest in the neighborhood of Dorchester, which is one of the most highly impacted neighborhoods in Boston, impacted by gun violence. And the priest had a gun turned into him that day for the buyback. And it was a .357 Magnum, and it was turned in by a 13-year-old boy in Dorchester. Tommy, who died in our apartment, was 13 years old. The gun that killed him was a .357 Magnum. So it just made everything worthwhile. Sometimes I'm almost drawn to situations thinking that I might be able to turn it out right and to have some control. Maybe even to bring me back to that place, maybe to bring me back to my brother's situations or Tommy's situation where I can step in and stop it from happening.
I work at the Elizabeth Stone House. It's a program for women and their children, and I believe it's a really great program. Women leave there with a lot of things that they didn't have when they came in the door. And we serve battered women and their children, women in emotional distress, and women recovering from substance. And we also have a transitional housing program and community groups, and I advocate for women in that program. And I like it because I'm one of them. And women can talk to me because I am them and they are me, and we have the same issues and we're mirrors for each other, and they can't get over on me. I find myself, they'll come to me and they'll say something, and I'll say, come on, you want to tell me something else now? And they'll start laughing because then they'll realize, that they can't get over on me.
I went back to Cambodia for the first time and have some money in my pocket. And I ended up starting youth group there too. A lot of help need a lot of help too in Cambodia. So I started 30 youth coming, doing the clean up the street, planting the tree, and I started with the small amount of money I had with me. And Now 3 years, I ended up staying there 3 years, you know, and now we have about 30,000 volunteers. I work also with the Southeast Asian at-risk youth in Blow now. I used to do that in Providence 3 years ago. We would ask them to solve their problems out before they fight each other, and I would do the outreach, you know, go on the street and try to talk to other gang members and all that at night, and it was a lot of work and very dangerous. You know, suffering is suffering. Kids suffering from drug, from one single parents and gangs. Now, it's not different from what I went through in Cambodia. The psychological effect is just the same, I think. You know, so I think they need trust. They need people who, after them all the time, do not give up on them. You know, promise something, pull it off. You know.
Hey, how are you? Hey, how you doing? Well, I think people don't see me necessarily as a politician, but they see me as somebody who has been wounded by life, and therefore the normal barriers that might separate one person from another, they don't see those barriers. They just see wounds or hurt, and they seem to identify with me, and then all of a sudden feel that I identify with them. And so they just come up to me and they'll hug me or give me a note or whisper in my ear, and I'm honored by that. I mean, I'm strengthened by that. If I can touch some other life in a positive way, that makes my day. I mean, that really helps me. They don't know it. They think I'm helping them. I heard a phrase that I like very much, that in the service of love, only broken hearts will do. So, you know, people who are struggling with life, struggling to get it all together, people who are trying to recover from trauma or injury or illness or disability or whatever other problem they're struggling to recover from, they really don't want to hear your strengths. They want to know your weaknesses and how you made it back.
I was believing that, you know, there's a period of time where you go through this feeling of, you know, grieving and so forth, and then it's all over. You're healed. And so I was waiting for that time to come, and I remember realizing one day that it's not going to come. It doesn't ever come. Once you realize that you can't go back to normal, then all of the numbing and alcohol and drugs in the world just isn't, you know, it's not worth it. What you can at least do is keep them alive through the work and actions that you do in some way, and it really does feel like you keep them alive. You really feel in close contact with them all the time. And I bring my brothers to work with me every day. I bring Tommy to work with me every day. And it's great. I feel like I spend more time with them than I do with the rest of my family sometimes.
And I feel like, you know, if you speak out first, you know, the healing yourself, the process of speaking is healing out yourself first. And then I think the acting out of helping other people, I think that's second step, and that's maybe even make you want more to live, continue to live, you know.
When you've been through a 40-year trauma or 30-something year trauma, as I had been through, that you don't just like, okay, it's all better. It's ongoing. And coming face to face with women that had been through what I had been through, for me, one, keeps it green, helps me to remember where I came from and what I had been through, keeps me grateful that I'm no longer there, that I made it through and I lived through it. And it keeps me humble that I could be back there, that I'm one bad decision away from being right back there. And it helps me to feel really good that I can have something that I can give to somebody else, that maybe they could have those things too, that they don't have to go back there.
Hemingway was right. Life breaks us all, but afterward many are strong at the broken places. And that's one of the things I've learned, that by the grace of God and the help of friends, it is possible to become strong, even at the most broken places in your life. Physical broken places, emotional broken places, spiritual broken places. We think we can never recover, but that's not correct. Truth of the matter is, the body, the mind, and the spirit, given support, given time, given energy, given faith and hope, and lots of courage, can recover.
You can say I'm a victim and think about how that feels, and then a second later say I'm a survivor and think about how that feels. I mean, you're ready to take on the world because of what you've been through. You have tremendous strength, and nothing will stop you. You know, you could move mountains with that passion that you have, and the strength that you've acquired through hardship.
I want to continue. If tomorrow I can help one other person, one more person, I think would be a little better. You know, I don't want to die. Maybe tomorrow, maybe I can help one more person. That's what I always think about, and make me want to go on in life. You know, and I'm happy when I feel that way, and I'm very sad when the past coming. You know, when my experience in Cambodia and the past. Want sometimes come back, you know, and it's okay, it's natural, I'm prepared for it too, you know. When it comes, I go to sleep again, you know, and then I go back to work, yeah.
I want to make sure that I inform anybody that will listen to me that there's a better way, that there's a different way, that it can be done, that you can come from a place where you have no hope, where you don't think that anything's ever going to change, that you're never going to be better. And it can get better. It will get better. And it does get better. Because I am better. And I work really, really hard to stay better. And I reach out my hand as often as I possibly could to pull the next woman, child, person, human being, man, I don't care who it is, along with me.